In this video we're taking a look at what embellishments acoustic guitar players can add to their playing. This is something that pro guitarists add all the time, but these aren't necessarily pro level things. They're just points that we want to be keeping in mind and moving your playing forward towards doing these things as a default when we're looking at common chord progressions, either using open chords, bar chords, or more advanced chord shapes. The first one, as you can no doubt guess from what I've just played there, is sus chords. Sus stands for suspended, and typically we're suspending the third. So the difference between, or the reason why we would call a sus chord a sus2 or a sus4 is because we're suspending the third degree of the scale. We're getting rid of that third, which would be the middle note of our major triad. And we are playing either the second or the fourth note of the scale. So that's where we get the sus4 or the sus2 chord name from. So for example, D major without the middle finger, we're suspending that major third, we're playing the major second. It's a sus2, add the 1, 2, 3, fourth note instead of the third, and we get a sus4 chord. Normal D major, D sus2, D sus4. And the great thing about suspended chords, or sus chords, is they're a fantastic way to make a riff out of just strumming a chord. So if I just strum, not really recognisable as anything, I'm just playing a D chord, but if I add a sus4, suddenly I'm playing Crazy Little Thing Called Love. A few other quick examples. That was Other Side of the World by Katie Tunstall, and Summer of '69 by Bryan Adams. Summer of '69 also does the same thing. On the A chord, we can also do this on a G chord, sus4 and sus2. Sometimes this is called add 9, so the ninth and the second of any scale are the same note, they're just an octave apart. So that's where the lines can blur a little bit more, but I wanted to illuminate we can also do this on a G chord. We can do a G sus4 kind of like this, but it doesn't sound as nice as... And this moves us, this way of playing a G, which I always think about as the George Harrison G, so he used it a lot. G sus4, back to a normal G. That's a really cool one to add if you're wanting to add these embellishments, and you can always add these sus chords. Say if you have a strumming pattern like down, down, up, down. You can always add a little embellishment, especially on a D chord with a D sus2 or a D sus4. Another way to add an embellishment is just not to strum all the strings all the time. Sometimes picking some single notes, perhaps to accent. You know, your sus, the note that we'd add in our sus chord, or a note that you're adding in a chord. But here's a couple of riffs that do this. I guess one of my favourites would be Pinball Wizard. And also, you know, the classic guitar song, House of the Rising Sun. You know, that's a beginner classic, but there's a lot going off in that. There's a lot of chords in it, and also straight away we've got a mix of a strum with 3 up picks. is a great one to learn if you want to start picking single strings as well as strumming, especially if you're wanting to add these embellishments in your playing where we do just that. Along a similar lines, we can do a similar trick with the G chord, where we'll be using this first finger to play other notes, essentially from the G major pentatonic. This is often learnt by people when they learn Wish You Were Here. That's where that technique is shown, but that's only that one song. But we can add this kind of thing. We can add it all the time, and that in combination with those other techniques, it certainly adds something that you want to consider adding to your playing. Finally, if you want to start adding some embellishments and variations in your acoustic or electric guitar playing, you can do a lot worse than learning some blues riff variations. And what I mean by that is variations on the standard blues riff, kind of the most basic one. That's an A chord or an A5 chord to an A6 chord, and we do the same on a D chord, we can do the same on an E chord. So anything we do here, we can move it down and move it up. It all kind of feels the same, so whichever one you learn, whatever variation, you can always move it up or move it down. We can do that with one extra note where we go to the 7th. That's actually why a lot of blues songs, when the chord sequence is written, you see, these 7th chords, dominant 7th chords come up a lot, because that note is actually in the riff. The note of A7 is actually there in the riff, it's that extra note. But there's loads of other variations to it, not least, this is a straight rhythm. Adding a bounce to it instead. Certainly something to try. Both of those I was playing with a bit of palm muting, which is something we looked at in my previous video in this series, where we looked at strumming embellishments that pros add that beginners might not. Palm muting sounds a lot different without any muting, and it just gives us kind of that one level. There are many famous riffs that are a slight variation on that, but very unique and recognisable actually, like Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. Doing the AC/DC thing of going minor third to major. Countless ones. I'll leave a couple of suggestions in the description down below of kind of blues recommended ones. But that's certainly something to try. If you play acoustic guitar and you're mainly just strumming, doing all 6 strings all the time, a great thing to add is those embellishments, the other ones we've covered in this series, but particularly a couple of blues examples, because they work on all the right techniques to make the most, to give you the most variation out of just playing acoustic guitar. Hopefully you liked that. Let me know what you thought to it in the comments below. Let me know what's brought on your playing more than anything. Any song suggestions, embellishment suggestions, anything else you'd like to see from this series, I'd love to find out. And you can watch more videos right now.